Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today is going to be the second video that I'll be doing in the Academic Writing Task 1 series, and we're going to discuss the marking criteria for Academic Writing Task 1. So before we start, I'd like to just introduce myself. My name is Michelle Oliver, and I'm an IELTS coach. I work with students who need to prepare for the academic writing and speaking sections of the exam. And I've helped so many students to pass, even students that had tutors and did other courses before me and failed. Then as soon as they started doing classes with me, they did really well, and I've only got 5-star reviews. So if you're watching this, please comment below, let me know where you're from, what are some of the struggles that you're having with task 1, and yeah, what are your goals? Let me know, and perhaps I can give you some quick tips on how you can improve. So let's dive in. As I said in the last video, task 1 is basically a piece of writing where you'll analyze some data and interpret it in the form of writing a report. And you have 20 minutes to complete this task. So the marking criteria for this task is out of 9, and it includes 4 categories. The first one is task response. Next is coherence and cohesion. The next one is vocabulary, and the next one is grammar. So we're going to take a look at each of these in a little bit more detail. But first, let's take a look at the bands and what each one means for your English level in relation to the Common European Framework Reference. So let's have a look. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you a little graphic which shows the levels. So if you just give me a second, I will share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm sure you guys should all be able to see my screen right now. And basically, this is just an outline of the Common European Framework Reference, which is basically levels of English starting from A1 all the way to C2. And then the IELTS exam, which scores from 0 all the way to 9. So if we look at level A1, that's basically someone who's just started learning English, you know, the greetings and some very basic words and phrases. Going up to sort of like B, the B levels are like your intermediate level or middle level student. You're not a beginner anymore, but you're not yet advanced. And then finally, we get like the C levels, which is C1 and C2. C1 would be an advanced user, and then C2 is basically like an expert user, but maybe not necessarily a native speaker. Okay, so now if we look at this side where we see the IELTS exam scores, they haven't really marked from 0 to 3 here because basically, if you're taking the IELTS exam, we would hope that you would get at least a score of 4 and above. That's normally requirements that some organizations or companies will have, is like a score from going from 4 and above. Because if you're at level 3 and below, probably you need to practice a little bit more to become competent or proficient enough, you know, for whichever level that you'll need to be, you know, whether you're going to be traveling or studying or working. Yes, so basically they'd like for you to obviously be at least a B1. But if you are B1, then obviously you can work up to, you know, the higher levels here. Okay, so basically the bottom level of B1, the lowest sort of score is like 4. And then B2 would be sort of between 5.5 to 6.5 at the upper level of B2. Like this is an intermediate student going towards advanced. And then a C1 student would get basically a score of 7. while someone who's the most proficient would get like a score of 9. This being like maybe the native speakers or someone who's become so close to a native like, English speaker. Okay, so this is pretty simple. This is just for me to give you an idea of where you could fall depending on your current English level. So often the students that I work with at the moment are sort of B2 level, aiming for a C level 1 score, sorry, C1 level score. And yeah, it does take a little bit of practice, but it's not impossible. Okay, so I'm just gonna also stop sharing my screen. And yes, let's get moving on to the next thing. So what I just wanted to also tell you is that if you can remember that each of these sections, there's 4 sections in the exam. It's reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Each of these sections is marked out of 9, and you would get an overall score of all of these sections added together. So let's say, for example, you got maybe 6 in reading and 6 for listening, and then maybe 7 for, or let's put it, yeah, let's say 5 for writing and another 5 for speaking. So if you had 6 and 6 and 5 and 5, they would take those scores, add them together, and it would give you a score of 5.5. Obviously, we'd hope that you'd do better. So yes, it's just to give you an idea. There are some organizations that will ask you for a minimum score in each section. Like, for example, they would want you to get a minimum of, say, 6 in each section, which means that you have to get 6 and above in each section, no matter what. And then there's other organizations which are a bit more flexible, and they might say you need an overall score of, let's say, 7, but it doesn't matter if, say, for example, your writing is like 6 or 6.5, because you can make it up when you're doing your reading and your listening section and perhaps get like 7 or 7.5, 8, and so on. So yes, that helps to be a little bit more flexible. Okay, so let's have a look. I just wanted to also share my screen with you again, just to show you some ideas of the scoring criteria. So just 1 second, here we go. Okay, so now, this is basically the scale. It's what I've explained already, but basically in like more detailed wording. What I'll do is I'll pop the link for this article below the video, and then you can review it and look at it in a little bit more detail. So as I said to you before, level 9 would be like your highest score. That's an expert user. The test taker has fully operational command of the language. Their use of English is appropriate, accurate, and fluent, and shows complete understanding. So as I said, this would be someone who's like practically a native speaker or just a very, very good user or an expert user of the language. Often, like an average score that students could be getting is, between 6 to 7 if you've done a lot of practice for the exam and, you're in like that B1, B2 sort of level, you could be getting around here. As you saw, the C1 starts from here, good user. So it says here, the test taker has operational command of the language, though with occasional inaccuracies, inappropriate usage, and misunderstandings in some situations. They generally handle complex language well and understand detailed reasoning. So basically, this is somebody who has generally good use of the language, but maybe just makes a few mistakes and perhaps every now and then might misunderstand a small detail, but it's not too bad. Okay, basically anything from 6 and below would be like B2 and maybe below that. Okay, and then like from here, level 3 and below. This is, as I said, for like the beginner users, and elementary users, A1 and A2 level. And in this case, it says, for example, on level 3, the test taker conveys and understands only general meanings in very familiar situations, and there are frequent breakdowns in communication. So this means someone who's still like learning the language, they just literally started understanding some very basic everyday usage, you know, like talking about like themselves and speaking about what they're doing currently, in the present tense. And you know, they can't speak very fast because they're needing to do a lot of translations and things. And then finally, 0 would be the test taker did not answer the questions at all. Well, we would hope that that's not the case for any of you. But yes, obviously, as we go through the levels, it just shows you that your level will increase more and more. And let's have a look now at more details regarding the criteria. So let me just stop sharing my screen quickly. Okay. Right. So now I'll show you a very quick look at what the overview of the marking criteria would look like. So if you give me a second, I'll share my screen one more time. Okay, so as I said, we're discussing task 1, writing academic task 1, and this is an overview of what the band descriptors look like. So as I said, there's 9 different levels, starting from 9, going down to 0, and then there's 4 different criteria: task achievements, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, which basically means vocabulary, and then grammatical range and accuracy. And as you can see, for each level, there's a different criteria, or like different, you know, acceptability of, you know, what they would say you've done or haven't done with regards to your writing. So let's look at it in more detail. Okay, so the first one. Let's go. Okay, so as I said, for all of these documents I'm sharing with you today, I'll be posting in the links below so that you can go and review them in more detail. But I just wanted to go through them with you because I know it can be overwhelming. And this video just aims to take you through the process of understanding the scoring criteria more easily, because, you know, there's resources all over the internet, and this just takes you through them in an order that hopefully makes sense. So if you are catching some of the details I've given so far, please let me know in the comments below. And if there's any questions you have, you're welcome to ask, and I'll definitely be getting back to you and helping you out. Okay, so as I said, there's these four different areas for the marking criteria: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Okay, so the first one, task achievements, this one is trying to check how fully, how appropriately, how accurately and relevantly you have answered the requirements, you know, that they've given you, and made sure to use a minimum of 150 words. So in task 1, as we've said in the previous video, which you can also go and view on my channel, you can get many different question types. And if you can follow a formula, sorry about that. So if you can follow a formula, it will make it easier for you to answer basically any question type. Okay, so remember, we can maybe just do a recap on the different question types. Firstly, there's a bar chart. There is also a line graph. There's a pie chart, and a table. These ones all require you to understand figures and to describe patterns of movement in data. And then there's also the process diagram, which you have to use to describe a process and the steps taken to allow something to happen. And then there's also maps where you use two different maps and you'll describe the features of the first map and then the changes that happen in the second map. Okay, and that's the few task types. There's also one other task type where they take more than one graph. So the line graph, bar graph, the table or the pie charts, and then they make one question from it. So you'll have like 2 or 3 different graphs that you need to analyze all at one time for the one report. Okay. And basically, as I said, if you follow the formulas, which we will deal with in the next few videos, we'll be analyzing each of those one at a time. Then you will be able to answer each question no matter what the topic is. Okay, so let's get to what do they actually want you to do to respond to the task for task 1? Well, basically, you're going to summarize the information. It's important, obviously, not to guess and like to give your own opinion, but to just give information based on what you can see. So we're not saying, I think that the information shows this because this and this. Like, you have to just analyze information and give factual data, like objectively. And so it's very academic language that you'll be using. So you're going to select key features of information. Firstly, you're going to provide sufficient detail to illustrate these features. So you need to give as much detail as possible so when the person who's reading your reports can imagine what you have written without actually looking at the diagram. Okay, you're going to report on the information, the figures and the trends accurately. So basically making sure that you're specifying whether things are moving up, down, the highs and the lows, and making sure that that information you're sharing is correct. You're going to perhaps compare and contrast information by highlighting, the trends that I've mentioned, the changes in the movements, and perhaps some of the differences in the data that you can see. And so that's also something they say here, rather than the mechanical description, reporting detail. So anybody is able to perhaps see a number, but what does that number actually mean? Can you describe and explain the data in an objective way? And then finally, presenting the response in an appropriate format. So remember that task 1 has a specific format, and we'll perhaps be doing this in another video. And you need to make sure that you're following the paragraph structure for that. Okay, so that's the first part. This is the task response. How did you answer the question? Did you include all of the information? Is the information correct? Okay, and then we will move on to coherence and cohesion. Coherence and cohesion basically looks at how did you organize the information and how did you develop your ideas? How did you link your information together to make it make sense? And basically using your cohesive devices, so the connecting words or connecting phrases in between your pieces of information, and how did you relate one piece of information to another? So the coherence and cohesion criteria, as they say here, will assess how did you logically organize the information and how did you progress from the beginning to the end of your report with the information that you've presented. And then the the appropriate use of paragraphing. So making sure you have paragraphs, as we will discuss in another video. And then your ideas within those paragraphs. And then also using the references for specific things and substituting them. So are you using some pronouns and like replacing them with other, synonyms and things? And then again, as I said, the discourse markers. So your transition phrases, how did you connect your ideas together? Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, as I said, remember, just pop them in the comments and let's get chatting. Okay, next one. The next thing that we'll look at is lexical resource. So in this case, we're having a look at um, how did you use your words for this task? So the range of words that you've used, have you used some synonyms instead of repeating one word multiple times? Adequacy and appropriacy. So like, did you make sure that you use topic specific words and express your attitude without being subjective? Remember, it's for task one that we're discussing right now. So we're not giving our opinion, but you can still use some adverbs to express, the information. For example, interestingly, or incredibly, or something like that, because that shows, like some emotion, but without being subjective. So precision of word choice and expression, again, this comes to tone of voice. The control and use of collocations, idiomatic expressions, and sophisticated phrasing. So obviously for task one, we're not going to be able to use any idioms. It is a very academic task, but there's definitely a lot of phrases and words that we can include that can help you to get a higher score than maybe just a 5 or a 6. Okay, then the density and communicative effect of errors in spelling and also word formation. So basically, trying to make sure that you don't make too many spelling mistakes and using the correct word forms. But obviously, we do still make mistakes. It's just how bad are those mistakes? Like what has the piece of word, or phrase that you've used affected your communication of your idea, yes or no? And that will determine, what score you could get for your vocabulary in this section. Okay, the next one is grammar. So in grammar, for example, task one, academic writing task one, they love to see passive voice and active voice usage, using the correct tenses, whether it's going to be past or present or future, depending on the information that they've provided you. Using different sentence structures, like, for example, simple and compound sentences. Um, and how accurate are those sentences once you've structured them? The density and communicative effect of grammar errors. So have those grammar errors you've made affected your ability to communicate your idea? Again, yes or no. And then they can determine, what score you should be able to achieve based on that. And the last one, not the least, last but not least, we say, the accurate and appropriate use of a punctuation. So of course we want to show them some usage and like variety in our punctuation, and basically making sure, maybe for example, that you include quotation marks, dashes, and brackets to vary your language a little bit. And this will also, contribute to you getting a higher score because they can see that you have more advanced use of the language. So I hope that this makes sense and this helps you to get an idea of what they're actually asking of you for each of these different criteria in the exam. And let me just have a look and see what else did I still want to discuss with you. Okay. I'm just going to share my screen again, if you don't mind. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sharing a detailed marking criteria sheet with you. As I said, this link will also be in the comments, in the description of the video, and you'll be able to access it at any time. But basically what they've done on this web page is they've gone through each of these bands in detail, talking about task achievements, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammar and grammatical range and accuracy. And they've gone through each one and explained each sentence clearly about what they expect from you. As I have shown you as well in the other documents, there's also a table format of this where you can see a summary of, the requirements for each band. But we can maybe go through it in a little bit of detail. So as I said, I will share this link with you guys in the comments, but for now, we can just have a look at this one. And I'd like to perhaps go through a few of these scores with you in detail, just to give you an idea of what you can expect for your scores. So as I said, most of my students end up being in this range here between 5 to 7 and sometimes going up to level 8 or band 8 score. And basically the idea is this. If you have answered all of the questions, but perhaps you could add a little bit more detail, or perhaps you've included some information that's not necessarily relevant or it's not correct, then you might get a score of 6. To get a score of 7, they would want you to include all of the details that have been, shown in the graph or the table, the map, and so on. And you have mentioned all of the details, but perhaps they feel like you could maybe add a little bit more. Okay, so let's have a look at 6. Number 6, here it's for coherence and cohesion. Number 6 says you can organize your information in somewhat a good way, but perhaps there is like a little bit of information that you could put in a better place, and perhaps using the transition words in a better way as well. While the 7 shows that you have actually organized your information well. It all makes sense. The order of the ideas also makes sense. It's got a good flow. You've used the correct, transition words throughout. Okay, so also for 6 and 7 here, this is vocabulary. So for vocabulary, if you're getting a 6, they're basically saying you have an adequate use of vocabulary, which means that you have enough words to speak about the topic, but perhaps not enough synonyms, for example. So you can speak about it, but you could definitely use a little bit more vocabulary and try to be a bit more flexible. And then another thing as well is that you attempt to use less common vocabulary, but you maybe make mistakes. So for example, you try to use an idiom, but maybe it's not exactly the correct usage or meaning. And then also for mistakes with your spelling and word formation, you do make quite a few, but they don't necessarily take away from your ability to communicate your idea. And then this is number 7, which is, as we said, like C1 level, which means that you have a decent amount of vocabulary to discuss the topic. You have some synonyms, and it allows you that flexibility to discuss it, but you can definitely, improve on that even more. Uses some less common lexical items with some awareness of style and collocation. So you've become a little bit more aware of how to use some idioms and collocations, but there's always room for improvement. And then here, may produce occasional errors in word choice, spelling, or word formation. So this means that you still make some mistakes, but definitely a lot less than someone who's at band 6. And finally, we come to grammar. So for the grammar, it says here that you use a mix of simple and complex sentence forms. And then it also says that you make some errors in grammar and punctuation, but they don't really reduce your ability to communicate your idea. Okay, and then finally, we're at band 7 of grammar. So this means that you are definitely able to use the more complex structures. You don't really make too many mistakes in your sentences anymore. And then you have good control over your grammar and punctuation, even though there might be ever so slightly few mistakes. And that's it. So I hope that this gives you a brief overview. I know I've only discussed band 6 and band 7, but you're welcome to check the links and just read a little bit more, or just post a question in the comments and I can get back to you about some more details if you have anything that you want to ask. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. So in the next lesson, we're going to discuss bar charts. So now we're going to basically go through each of the different task types. We'll analyze the question and like the sample answer and discuss how you can answer, like as I say, for example, we'll do the bar chart next week. How can you answer the question on your own? And then in future lessons, we'll analyze the other task types and delve down deeper into how you can plan and write each of those tasks on your own as well. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do it now so that you can get more IELTS advice, tips and tricks in the future. And I hope that you guys found this video useful. I was really enjoying planning it for you, and I look forward to planning the next one. So I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.